Welcome, everyone, to the Courageous Truth Podcast. As always, I'm honored that you have chosen to spend a little bit of time with me today. Last episode, we talked a little bit about some things that are going on here in Washington. We talked about an AI misinformation contract that the Secretary of State has here in Washington. We talked a little bit about the domestic violence extremist task force that was not passed through legislation yet somehow seems to still be working its way through our tax dollars, and we are grateful for them. No, we're not. Just kidding. But I want to talk now, and I want to spend most time of this time, the remaining time that we have together, about RCW 4310-305. And if you look that up in Washington State, you just type that in your search engine, and it'll take you right there. Probably to this document I have right here. This is a very big one, and this is the one that is the most concerning to me. In my last episode, I talked a little bit about the rights that we have here in Washington State. We have a right to conscience. We have a right to free speech. We have a right to freedom. And I think freedom of speech, Article 1, Section 5, I want to say this again. Every person may freely speak, write, and publish on all subjects, even subjects we may not like or may not match with our ideology, being responsible for the abuse of that right. We are responsible to one another for what we say. But what we cannot do is allow one ideology to have access to all free speech and punish the other side for speaking out against them, because that is what is going to happen. Now, the Hate Crimes and Biased Incident Hotline. Now, apparently, 911 is not good enough. 911 won't work. So these crimes are so grotesque. These crimes are so evil. These crimes are so frightening and scary that 911 can't do anything about it. 911 can't stop it. But we need a special hotline equipped fully with someone on the other end to wipe my liberal tears as I call them to tell them what I've seen and tell them what I've heard. This is what it says. Again, RCW 4310.305. The Attorney General's office shall oversee a hate crimes and biased incidents hotline staffed during business hours and dedicated to assisting people who have been targeted or affected by hate crime and biased incidences. Okay, can you just, now you have to look at that. Now, maybe you're not politically aware and you're like, well, that sounds okay. Hate crimes are bad. And I would believe crimes are bad. In fact, I hate crimes. But what makes a hate crime so awful that you can't even define the hate that the crime is going to do, and you have to have its own special hotline, because the crime is so severe, it doesn't warrant a call to 911 because no laws have really been broken, but you need a hotline for someone who's been targeted or affected by it. Provide appropriate information and referred to people who have been targeted or affected by hate crimes and bias incidences that is victim-centered, culturally competent, and trauma-informed. What? This is a law in Washington State. We tried to fight this. In fact, my church, I talked about it from the pulpit. We talked about this, but biased incidences. Like if you were playing Duck, Duck, Goose and you weren't chosen, that's a biased incident. Like, let's say you were sitting next to a Chinese kid and they chose the Chinese kid over you who was, a Mexican or something. That's a hate crime. That's a biased incident. And it created a victim. I mean, you see how this can go, all right? And who's the one who decides if it's a hate crime or a biased incident? The one who's making the call. The one who's making the call. And this needs to be as accessible to as many residents of Washington as possible. As many. The Attorney General office shall, to the extent possible, identify local service providers and culturally specific services to refer people who have been targeted or affected by hate crime and biased incidences. the Attorney General. This is Bob Ferguson. He wrote this when he was the Attorney General. What is this guy doing? Like, he's about to be our governor. What is his agenda here? Okay. To ensure that the advisory committee has diverse and inclusive representation of those affected by its work, advisory committee members are entitled to be reimbursed for travel expenses if they are elected officials or by participating on behalf of an employer, government entity, or other organization. In other words, they are going to be paid by your tax dollars and my tax dollars. By July 1st, 2025, the Attorney General's office must develop and implement a pilot hotline program that will assist individuals affected by the hate crimes or bias incidents in at least 3 counties. So it's going to start in 3 counties, and then by January 1st, 2027, it has to be statewide. So there's going to be a pilot program, and it'll be a disaster, or it won't be used. I don't know, honestly know what's going to happen. My concern, I'll tell you my concern in a minute. Any information regarding, I'm just reading right off the RCW. Any information regarding hate crimes or bias incidences that reveals the personal identifying information of any individual must not be included in a public report prepared in accordance with this section. So in other words, if you snitch on someone, you call in for a hate crime, they don't need your information because it puts you at risk. So you're an anonymous caller. Thank goodness. That way you can say anything you want with the freedom of not being a victim to this biased incidents. So let's play this out culturally. What's going to happen? Politics affects culture. So what happens now is you have a weapon or a crutch, however you depend on look at it, I think probably both, that will allow you to be vocal when you feel you have been targeted by a hate crime. Maybe someone cuts in front of you in line in the grocery store, and that person is a different ethnicity of you. Different ethnicity than you. And you take that as a hate crime because of their cultural appropriation. Or maybe you overhear someone saying a word that you don't like, and you get upset. You get triggered. You call this hotline. Or maybe at work you were late five days in a row and you get suspended for it. But that's a biased incident because racism made you late. Because racism kept you up all night because you heard a story on the news. And the way liberals act, the victimization that's already in our culture here in Washington State, you know for a fact that I am not being extreme or over-exaggerating what could possibly happen. Okay, they're putting litter boxes in schools here in Washington State so kids who think they're animals can use the bathroom without bias. All right? What are we teaching our kids with this? Not to handle interpersonal conflict like a normal person, but to call Big Brother. This is what happened in Germany. This is what happened in Eastern Europe and Estonia when the communists began to roll through. This is what's happened in Russia. Live not by lies. Neighbor snitching on neighbor. And they'll know will work because of COVID. You were having a barbecue. You had one too many people over during lockdowns and your neighbor called. You weren't wearing a mask. Your neighbor narked you out. They've already started to build it into the culture. Why would they do this? Because they want their ideology and their agenda to have ultimate power. Because their agenda is obviously so fragile that people don't want to partner with it mentally, physically, or emotionally. They want to run from it and do everything they can to stand against it so that you have to be overbearing and use intimidation tactics. And that's where we're at as Washington State. I've talked to a lot of people on my TikTok account. Follow Courageous Truth Podcast on TikTok or on this YouTube. I put a lot of shorts up, just offering just some insight and hopefully inspiration and hopefully just to keep us aware of what's going on in Washington. But there's a lot of people that have given up on the state, and rightfully so. There's more blue voters than red voters. We'll never win. And they're not lying. So what do we got to do? Flee our home or stay and fight? We either stand or we surrender. What are we going to do? Because complacency is not even an option anymore. Complacency means surrender. This ideology is working its way into every fabric of society. It's working its way into the church. We're seeing the DEI socialist agenda creeping its way into the church. And once we lose the church, we lose all hope of freedom. Because who's going to stand? Who's going to stand against this? It's got to be people like you and me that love our home. It's got to be people that say we're not going to allow this. And I put this out on one of my TikTok videos. It was really funny. And someone commented, I can't remember who it was, but they said, well, can we call the hotline on the governor? And I thought, that's a brilliant idea. What if we flip the script on him? And every time the governor said something stupid, we called it on them. And we said the governor's being able, because we know Jay Inslee and what he thinks about the red-wing voters, conservatives. We know he's been very outspokenly verbally abusive towards us plenty of times. What if we called it on them? What if we called it on our government school boards? What if we called it on the DEI at the local bank or whatever, at our workplace? What if we called it on them? And we overwhelmed it with right-wing complaints about blue ideology. What if we did that? And we just let this line have it until they were so sick of it, they had to shut it down. Sounds good. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. But I thought it was a great, great way. But what happens with this is they create a culture where people can't trust each other. People don't stand together anymore. People won't work together. People won't even talk to one another. It's divide and conquer. It's the oldest trick in the book. If they can divide us, they can conquer us. And once they conquer us, everything that we have becomes theirs. They already overtax us. I was just down in Arizona. Gas was like $3.04. I was down there 4 days ago. Came back home to Washington. It's $1.20 more. Same gasoline, same Shell station, but there's gas tax here. They are taxing us to death. We flee or we fight. We stand or we surrender. What's it going to be? What's it going to be, Washington State? And it's got to be the citizens. We have to organize. We have to communicate. We have to trust. We have to set aside petty differences. We're going to have to work with people that have different religious beliefs. We're going to have to work with people that have different habits. We're going to have to work with people that maybe were raised different. But isn't that what makes us great? Isn't that what makes living in the United States so beautiful? Okay? And the last thing I want to say is get ready for the abuse. Get ready for the spiritual manipulation. Get ready to be the villain because of what you believe. And that's where we're going to land. If we're going to save our state, it's got to start in the hearts of the people, where we are purposing without a doubt to stand against the ideological onslaught. Because I'll tell you this, the conservative ideologies have passed and stood the test of time, where progressive ideologies crumble the moment they are incepted. And the progressive left-wing woke ideology will always crumble. But we just have to outlast them. It will implode and they will turn on themselves. So God bless you. Thank you for continuing to take a courageous stand for the truth. I'm really, really happy that I'm back here online. Gonna try and focus after this Christmas season on making this podcast more focused on Washington and getting some key interviews set up. The holidays are upon us, and I'm obviously a small platform, but so I'm going to put out a lot of shorts. You'll see a lot. Continue to like, subscribe, share with your family and friends. Want to get subscribers up? I've almost hit 200. I think once you hit about 500 subscribers, then things really start kicking in on your YouTube channel, and we can start getting the message out. Because it's not my message. This is Washington State message. It's the message of the church. It's the message of freedom-loving conservative people that love America and just want to raise their families and love their God and live their life the way they want to live it. And we need to protect that. We need to speak up for that. So God bless you. Continue to take a courageous stand for the truth. I'll see you next time right here at the Courageous Truth Podcast. Now more than ever, we need to be courageous. And we need to be courageous for the truth, because remember, the truth requires courage. God bless you. See you next time.